Sometimes, the greatest threat doesn't come from shouting or aggressive actions, but from a cold silence and a subtle, almost imperceptible smile. Have you ever met someone who made you feel uneasy, even though they didn't do anything obviously wrong? That's no coincidence. According to renowned psychiatrist Carl Jung, there is a hidden trait within people, difficult to detect but extremely dangerous, that, if ignored, could cost you dearly. In today's video, we'll uncover that subtle sign, a truth that may make you rethink how you judge others. Don't look away, make sure to subscribe and watch until the end, because what you're about to learn could change the way you see the world forever. We often think that danger comes from obvious, public behaviors, violent individuals, loud voices, or clearly deceitful people. But the truth runs much deeper. The threat Carl Jung once referred to isn't loud or showy. It hides beneath a polite, self-controlled, and often charming exterior. What makes it dangerous is not that it acts like a threat, but that it makes us unaware that we are in danger. It's like a colorless, odorless toxic smoke, enough to paralyze our deepest instinct for caution. Jung pointed out that we don't just live with the self we're consciously aware of, we also live with a shadow, part of the psyche, the repressed, hidden mind that exists outside of conscious awareness. And it is from that place that the most dangerous aspects of a person are often born. This isn't about being inherently evil, it's the inevitable result of social conditioning. From a young age, we learn to suppress what isn't rewarded or accepted. But what gets rejected, hurt feelings, anger, envy, hunger for power, and even fear, doesn't disappear. It relocates. It moves into the shadow. What's frightening is that when a person refuses to face their own shadow, they lose control over it. It starts to control them unconsciously. And in some cases, the shadow manifests not as fleeting anger or deep insecurity, but as deliberate manipulation, wrapped in the guise of moral righteousness. These individuals may act like kind, understanding, unconditionally good people, but deep inside, a quiet motive simmers. To control, dominate, and weaken others in order to feel stronger themselves. Have you ever interacted with someone who seemed perfectly fine on the surface, but after each conversation, you walked away feeling judged, subtly controlled, or worse, emotionally drained? That could be a sign of someone being unconsciously driven by their shadow, or worse, someone fully aware of what they're doing and exploiting it. This is the type of person Jung warned us about, not dangerous because they growl like wolves, but because they smile like angels. Jung called this phenomenon shadow projection. When someone is unwilling to face the dark side within themselves, they begin to see and hate those same qualities in others. They condemn selfishness, while skillfully manipulating others for personal gain. They criticize anger, while secretly harboring resentment. This is the most dangerous kind, not only because they harm others, but because they destroy the truth of who they really are. Even more concerning, people like this are often highly socially intelligent. They know how to blend in, craft their image, even become admired and loved. But if you look closely, you'll notice a pattern. They are never truly close to anyone. There's an invisible distance between them and the rest of the world. A mask too perfect, to the point where it feels like you're speaking to a carefully managed persona, not a real human being. Jung didn't write these ideas to make us paranoid or suspicious of everyone, but to awaken our inner awareness. To understand that the most dangerous person isn't the one who has a shadow, but the one who doesn't know it's there. The more they deny it, the less they can control it. And when it's out of control, the shadow finds its way to emerge, in the form of manipulation, domination, or cold-hearted moralism. This brings us to a critical question. How can we recognize someone whose shadow is unchecked before they begin to affect us? And more importantly, how can we make sure we don't become that kind of person ourselves? All of these manifestations are not random. They are messages, encoded signals sent by the shadow, hoping that one day, the conscious mind will be brave enough to listen and decipher them. But not everyone is ready, because facing the shadow means confronting the parts of ourselves we don't want to admit. The envy when someone else succeeds, the resentment of being abandoned, the repressed anger from always having to be the kind person. Carl Jung once said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." This statement reveals a profound truth. True growth does not come from denying the ugly parts within, but from daring to enter that dark space, mindfully and responsibly. Imagine someone who always presents themselves as gentle, forgiving, and never angry. Society praises them. Friends love them. But inside, they may be holding on to smoldering anger, long-standing disappointment from constantly suppressing their real feelings. They do not allow themselves to be hurt, to be vulnerable, or to express improper thoughts. Over time, these emotions can accumulate into chronic headaches, depression, or an inexplicable sense of emptiness. Jung believed that the shadow is not only the dwelling place of negative things, but also a treasure trove forgotten. Sometimes, what we bury isn't bad, it simply doesn't fit the role we were forced to play. The good child, the dutiful wife, the always cheerful coworker. A girl taught from a young age not to speak loudly, not to argue, not to express ambition, may grow into a woman who always puts others first. But in her shadow might be a powerful leader, a bold spirit locked away behind the door of politeness. We often think the shadow is only dangerous when it explodes. But in reality, it's far more dangerous when it is chronically repressed. A person who never confronts their shadow may become cold toward others, judging the weaknesses they themselves refuse to acknowledge. They may seek control in relationships, not because they are truly strong, but because they fear losing control over the emotions they never learned to face. A central idea in Jung's thought is the principle of projection. The things we have not accepted within ourselves are often projected onto others. If you've ever met someone who made you uncomfortable for no clear reason, it might be that you're seeing a reflection of a part of yourself that you've rejected. Someone who never dares to be ambitious might despise those who are too ambitious. Someone who constantly tries to please others might look down on those who dare to live truthfully with their feelings. The shadow, if not acknowledged, will always try to emerge through uncontrollable channels. But if faced, accepted, and integrated, it becomes an ally. It's no longer an inner enemy working against you, but a part of you, authentic, vibrant, and powerful. Jung called this the journey of individuation, where a person is no longer divided between their social persona and their true self. Facing the shadow is not weakness. It is an act of courage. It is when you sit down with yourself, take off the mask, and honestly ask, what am I hiding from? It is when you listen to your anger without judgment. When you admit your envy without shame. When you dare to face the truth that you, too, have limitations and dark corners. Only then can you truly be free. No longer ruled by unconscious reactions. No longer forced to maintain a perfect image. No longer afraid that one day someone will see the real you because you have already dared to see it first. And more importantly, you've learned to love it. In the next part, we will explore in more depth how Jung believed one could begin the journey of confronting their own shadow, a journey that is not easy, but foundational for true psychological and spiritual maturity. Stay with us, because what comes next might completely change the way you understand yourself. So what truly connects all these frightening manifestations, from sudden emotional outbursts, manipulative behaviors hidden beneath a mask of kindness, to persistent dissatisfaction and a spiral into spiritual loneliness? Jung has an answer, and it's not an easy one to hear. It's the ego, the psychological structure we use to define who I am. But the scary part isn't the existence of the ego itself, but our absolute identification with it. The ego is not bad. It is necessary for living in society, for forming self-awareness, and for setting boundaries. But when the ego becomes overly dominant, it denies every part that does not fit the story it tells about itself. And so, the shadow is born, not as an external enemy, but as the abandoned part of our own soul. The shadow contains all the things the ego refuses to acknowledge. It is the anger we deny because we want to be likable. It is the desire we suppress to be considered noble. It is the fear of weakness we reject to maintain a strong image. And paradoxically, the more we try to deny these parts, the more they control us. Jung once said, "You do not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." This is an invitation to face the shadow, not to destroy it, but to integrate it, to look directly at the rejected parts of ourselves and say, I see you. And I am no longer afraid of you. Yet most of us were never taught how to do this. In modern culture, the shadow is not only forgotten, it is locked away in the basement and the door is bolted shut. We grow up with messages like, always be positive, don't get angry, forgive, be noble. And while these advices have good intentions, they often lead to a subtle form of hypocrisy, a mask of virtue nurtured by denial. The irony is, the more people try to be good, by society's definition, the further they drift from themselves. They smile while full of resentment inside. They help others but secretly despise weakness. They speak words of love, but their hearts are dry because they have never learned to love the dark parts within themselves. This is not an accusation. It is a wake-up call. Because only when we have the courage to look at our shadow can we stop performing and start living authentically. Integrating the shadow is not a one-time act. It is a lifelong process. Every time you notice a negative emotion arising and instead of pushing it away, you pause to listen, that is progress. Every time you realize that your criticism of others reflects something you haven't accepted in yourself, that is insight. And every time you see both light and shadow within yourself, you are entering a new depth of maturity. We do not have to be perfect. In fact, Jung would say that the desire for perfection is the root of tragedy. Because perfect is an ideal created by the ego, while wholeness is what the soul longs for. And wholeness can only be achieved when we embrace everything, the brilliant parts as well as the dark ones. So, do you dare to return? Dare to look at the places you usually avoid? Dare to question the good parts you proudly display, to see if there is any avoidance hiding behind them? Perhaps that is the beginning of a profound journey, where you not only know who you are, but learn to love all that you are. Not by self-delusion, but through absolute honesty with yourself. Because sometimes, the greatest gift is not in the light we chase, but in the darkness we have the courage to enter. And in that very moment, when you sit facing your shadow without judgment, you truly begin to be free. If a person cannot admit that both darkness and light exist within them, then the goodness they display is nothing but a thin, easily chipped layer of paint, potentially more dangerous than any openly negative behavior. Carl Jung did not say this to wound our pride, but to show us a true path of growth, the path of integration rather than denial. The shadow Jung referred to is not a demon. It is not the embodiment of evil, nor is it proof that we are bad people. On the contrary, the shadow is the abandoned part, a living but unacknowledged piece within our consciousness. We do not eliminate it by denying it. Instead, we only make it stronger in the unconscious. And the most alarming thing is that when the shadow is buried too deep, it no longer remains under our control. It controls us. Think of people you have known, or even yourself, who insist they never get angry, that they are never selfish, that they always put others first, are always right, always loving, never wrong. On the surface, this sounds noble. But deep down, what do you sense? A strange tension, something suppressed and restrained. A lack of authenticity. Because in truth, if you are human, you have been angry. You have been jealous. You have manipulated. You have lied, whether to protect someone else or yourself. There is nothing wrong with that. What is wrong is denying that you have ever been like that, and that you still can be. Maturity is not about completely eliminating the shadow, but about knowing it exists. You know when it rises. You feel jealousy but don't let it control your actions. You recognize when you're manipulating others with kindness, and you step back. You are honest with yourself about that dark side, and that honesty creates real trust. Jung believed those who have made peace with their shadow tend to be less dangerous. They are accustomed to facing the rough parts within themselves. They no longer need to perform. They don't try to prove they are perfect. And because of that, they often have a calm, profound presence, a quality that makes others feel safe. Not because they are absolutely good, but because they are absolutely honest. Conversely, those who insist they are always right tend to create mental chaos around them. They do not see the harm they cause because their ego doesn't allow them to admit it. They rationalize their behavior, blame others, and always place themselves in a moral high ground. You can argue with them, but you cannot reach them. Because any feedback is seen as an attack, a threat to the ideal image they have built for themselves. Worse yet, because they believe they have no shadow, they never guard themselves. And so the shadow works in the unconscious, subtle, powerful, and uncontrollable. When such people hurt others, they do not realize it. And if you try to tell them, you'll be labeled as negative, wrong, or the problem. They are not malicious, but they are dangerous, because they are unaware. In the spiritual world, many pursue light, positivity, love, enlightenment. But as Jung emphasized, light without shadow is an illusion. True light can only exist when we fully know the shadow. Otherwise, we are just running away, not unlike those who deny their human parts in the name of virtue. If you have ever felt something off when dealing with someone who always seems good, chances are you have encountered a mask of morality. Your intuition is not wrong. Sometimes, the danger does not lie in the loud and violent, but in those who seem gentle yet never admit mistakes. Never apologize. Never self-reflect. And that is why awareness of the shadow is not a minor matter. It is a sign of true spiritual maturity. It is not negativity. It is honesty. It is courage. It is the foundation for change. Where do you want to start? Begin by listening to the moments you react strongly to others. What do you hate about them? Selfishness, hypocrisy, arrogance? Most likely, what you hate in them is something you have not accepted in yourself. Not because you are bad, but because you are human. And there, in those moments of self-questioning, without excuses, without defenses, you are stepping out of the spiritual blindness Jung warned about. You are beginning to see. And once you see, you are no longer controlled by the darkness. You begin to have choice. And that is what freedom is. So next time you meet someone who makes you feel uneasy even though they seem perfect, remember, darkness is not scary when recognized. Only when denied does it become a threat. And if you find yourself wearing that mask of morality, if you've ever been afraid to admit your imperfect humanity, please forgive yourself. Sometimes, the bravest journey in life is not to conquer the outside world, but to take the first step inward, where the darkness waits for us to face it. Not to be frightened by it, not to be swallowed by it, but to be acknowledged. Jung once said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." This is a powerful reminder in today's world, where people rush to seek positivity, yet fear the uncomfortable truths about themselves. There is a painful paradox many are unwilling to admit. The more we try to be good, by society's standards, the more we tend to abandon ourselves. Because the shadow does not disappear simply because you don't mention it. It does not weaken because you ignore it. On the contrary, it seeps into every choice, every word, every action that you believe is reasonable, but is actually guided by unprocessed wounds. Have you ever asked yourself, why do I react so strongly when others don't listen to me? Why do I feel threatened when someone else shines brighter? Why do I feel uncomfortable when others talk about their pain, not with compassion, but with dislike? This is not cruelty. It is the shadow knocking at the door. It does not ask you to become a bad person. It only asks you to see it. Every negative emotion is not a fault, but a message. A whisper from the part of your soul that has been neglected for too long. You might ask, what should I do with my shadow? Should I fix it? Remove it? You do not fix the darkness, nor do you wash it away. You sit with it. You listen to it. You allow it to speak, but you do not let it control you. That is the art of living that few dare to learn. Jung believed that the shadow, when properly integrated, becomes a powerful source of creative energy. Many mistakenly think that the ugly part of us only destroys. But in fact, it contains instinct, passion, perseverance, and a fierce will to live, things that, when suppressed too much, turn us empty, passive, and vulnerable. Imagine, a person who never gets angry will not know how to protect their boundaries. A person who never envies may never know the desire to grow. A person who never allows themselves to fail will never know what true courage feels like. The shadow, when embraced by the light of consciousness, is no longer frightening. It becomes a companion, a truthful, rough but essential part of your soul. And then you stop trying to be a perfect model. You begin to be your true self, and that is an irreplaceable beauty. But this path is not easy. It requires you to give up your roles, to give up the need to be loved for perfection, and accept that you may be hated, misunderstood, judged for living authentically. But in return, you gain something priceless, inner freedom. No longer afraid of who you are. No longer afraid of being discovered. No longer living inside a distorted mirror house built by the ego. And then you look back at the world. You see more clearly. Those who hurt others are not necessarily evil, but simply have not learned to face their own shadows. Those who always preach morality may not have a soul reconciled with themselves. And those who are quiet and humble often are the ones who have gone through the fiercest internal battles. That is why Jung was not just a psychoanalyst. He was a spiritual guide. Not to lead us to perfection, but to lead us closer to ourselves. There is both light. There is also darkness. And the most sacred thing is when both are acknowledged.